Listen to me carefully. What I'm about to share with you today comes from decades of exploring the deepest chambers of the human psyche. You think you don't know how to read people? You're wrong. You've been doing it your entire life. You just haven't realized it yet. Every time you walk into a room and sense tension, every time you look at someone smile and feel something's off, every time you analyze a conversation long after it's ended, you're attempting to penetrate the veil of consciousness and touch something deeper. But here's what most people miss, and it's crucial. When you think you're reading someone else, you are actually projecting your own unconscious onto them. Let me tell you something I discovered through 50 years of working with the human mind. The unconscious doesn't lie. It can't. While the conscious mind constructs elaborate masks and social personas, the unconscious reveals itself in every gesture, every reaction, every inexplicable emotion. And today, I'm going to teach you how to see through these masks using 3 fundamental questions. Questions that will change not just how you understand others, but how you understand yourself. Are you ready? Because once you learn to see this way, you can never unsee it. People come to me and say, Dr. Jung, I wish I could read minds. I wish I knew what people really think. And I smile because they don't understand. They are already doing it every single day. When you meet someone and immediately feel distrust, when you sense hostility in a neutral comment, when you are inexplicably drawn to or repelled by a stranger, your unconscious is reading patterns, scanning for archetypal images, matching present situations with ancient memories stored in what I call the collective unconscious. You are, in fact, a mind reader. You are just not conscious of the process. But here's the problem. Most of what you think you are perceiving in others is actually your own shadow material being reflected back at you. Your mind isn't a clear window. It's a stained glass panel, tinted by your personal history, your complexes, your unintegrated experiences. When you look at someone, your unconscious instantly activates, searching through its vast library of images and memories to find familiar patterns. I'll give you an example from my own practice. A patient once told me, "That man is dangerous. I can feel it." When I asked her to describe what made her feel this way, she couldn't articulate it. So I asked her, "Oh, are you remembering a time when you felt endangered by someone else?" Her face changed. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "My father. That man reminds me of my father." You see, she wasn't reading him. She was reading her own unconscious fear, her own unprocessed trauma being triggered by superficial similarities. This is what I mean when I say that understanding your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. The persona, the mask we all wear in society is designed to hide our true nature, even from ourselves. But the unconscious can't maintain this charade. It bleeds through in our behaviors, our reactions, our seemingly irrational responses. And once you learn to observe these manifestations, you don't need to guess what someone thinks. You can see the unconscious structure operating beneath their conscious awareness. The first question, what do they fear losing? Now, let me give you the first key to unlocking the unconscious. Ask yourself, what does this person fear losing most? This single question, if you truly understand how to apply it, will reveal more about someone's psychological structure than hours of conversation. Why? Because fear is the shadow's native language. The shadow, that rejected, repressed part of the personality, speaks through our fears. What we cannot bear to lose shows us what unconscious forces control our behavior. I've seen it thousands of times. The person who fears losing love becomes a people pleaser, sacrificing their authentic self to maintain connection. The one who fears losing control becomes rigid, defensive, unable to surrender to life's natural flow. The one who fears losing their image constructs an elaborate persona, but beneath it, they are terrified of being seen as they truly are. Let me tell you about a case that illustrates this perfectly. I once treated a highly intelligent woman. Let's call her Claire. She had a brilliant mind, held an impressive position, yet she would become absolutely devastated by the smallest criticism. A minor comment would trigger such defensive reactions that she would sever relationships entirely. On the surface, you might see arrogance. You might judge her as oversensitive, difficult, impossible to work with. But when I asked myself, what does she fear losing? The answer became clear. She feared losing the sense that she was enough. Deep in her unconscious, there was a wounded child who had been made to feel inadequate. And she had spent her entire adult life constructing an identity to prove that child wrong. Every criticism wasn't just feedback. It was an existential threat to the carefully constructed self she had built to survive. When you can see someone's behavior through this lens, judgment dissolves. You are no longer reacting to their defense mechanisms. You are seeing the frightened soul beneath, the part of them that hasn't yet been integrated into consciousness. This is what I call seeing through the persona to the self. The self, the totality of the psyche, conscious and unconscious, is always trying to become whole. But the ego, that center of conscious identity, fights to maintain control, to preserve what it believes it cannot lose. Your fears map the territory where your ego believes its survival depends. And here's where it becomes truly interesting. When you ask this question about others, you inevitably turn it inward. Why does their fear of abandonment irritate you? Perhaps because you too carry that fear in your own shadow. Why does their need for control trigger you? Perhaps because your own need for freedom is fighting against your own suppressed desire for structure. You see, the questions we ask about others are always, ultimately, questions about ourselves. This is the nature of psychological projection. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. The outer world becomes a screen upon which we project our own unconscious content. The second question, what makes them angry? If fear reveals what someone protects, then anger reveals where they've been wounded. This is my second question. What makes them angry? I've learned through decades of analytical work that everything that irritates us about others leads us to an understanding of ourselves. Anger is never just about the present moment. It's an eruption from the unconscious, a volcanic expression of old wounds that never healed, conflicts that never resolved. Watch carefully. When someone becomes enraged over being ignored, they are not simply responding to being overlooked. They are reliving every time they felt invisible, every instance their existence was dismissed. When someone explodes at perceived disrespect, you are witnessing the reactivation of a complex, a charged cluster of emotions and memories in the unconscious that has gained autonomous power. I remember a therapy session where a mother came to me, troubled by her explosive anger toward her young son. She knew she was overreacting, but she couldn't control it. So I asked her, "What about your child's behavior makes you so angry?" She sat in silence for a long time. Then tears came. "I feel useless," she finally said. "Just like my mother made me feel when I was his age." You see what happened? Her anger wasn't about her son at all. It was about the unlived life within her, the wounded child in her own psyche who had never received the love and validation she needed. Her son's normal childhood disobedience was triggering this complex, and it would erupt with a force that had nothing to do with the present situation and everything to do with the unintegrated past. This is why I say that the unconscious is always trying to communicate with us. Anger is one of its loudest voices. It says, "There is something here that needs your attention. There is a wound that needs consciousness, integration, acceptance." When you can observe someone's anger without reacting, you activate what I call the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold opposing tensions and create something new. You are no longer caught in the automatic reaction. You are bringing consciousness to an unconscious process. And in that space, transformation becomes possible. I've noticed that truly centered individuals, those who have done the work of integrating their shadow, don't lack anger or darkness. They've simply made the unconscious conscious. They've faced their own rage, their own wounds, their own shadow material, and integrated it. When they encounter anger in others, they don't meet it with more anger. They meet it with understanding because they recognize the suffering beneath. The third question, how do they treat those who cannot benefit them? Now we come to the third question. And this one cuts straight to the core of someone's psychological development. How do they treat those who cannot benefit them? This question reveals whether someone operates primarily from the ego or has touched the self. The ego is concerned with power, status, advantage. It divides the world into useful and useless, important and insignificant. But the self, that central archetype of wholeness, recognizes the divine spark in all beings. When I observe someone, I don't listen to their words about kindness or morality. I watch how they treat the waiter, the janitor, the person who can give them nothing in return. That behavior comes from a deeper place than the persona. It emerges from the true state of their psychological development. I once knew a woman, successful, articulate, admired in a field. At a dinner, after a business meeting, a young waiter brought the wrong order. She could have reacted with irritation, with that unconscious cruelty people show when they believe someone is beneath them. Instead, she smiled genuinely and said, "It's no problem. I've worked in service before. I understand the pressure." In that moment, she revealed something profound about her psychological wholeness. She wasn't kind because kindness served her ego. She was kind because she had integrated the experience of powerlessness, had made conscious her own shadow of vulnerability, and could therefore see herself in everyone she met. This is what I mean when I speak of individuation, the process of becoming whole. An individuated person doesn't divide the world into categories of worth. They recognize that the beggar and the king both carry the same psychological structure. Both house the same collective unconscious. Both participate in the same human struggle toward consciousness. The way you treat those who cannot benefit you reveals your relationship with your own powerlessness, your own rejected parts, your own shadow. Those who look down on others are invariably those who cannot accept the inferior function within themselves, that least developed part of their personality that fills them with shame. I think of the archetypal image of the wounded healer, which appears across cultures and throughout human history. The healer is powerful not despite their wounds, but because of them. They have descended into their own darkness, faced their own brokenness, and emerged with the capacity to recognize suffering in others. This is true psychological authority, not the authority of the inflated ego, but the authority of the self that has touched its own depths. The mirror principle. You are reading yourself. Now, I want to share with you something that may disturb you at first, but it's essential for true psychological understanding. When you read others, you are not truly reading them. You are reading yourself. I have devoted my life's work to understanding this principle. Every time you have a strong reaction to someone, irritation, contempt, fascination, desire, you are not having an objective response. You are having an encounter with your own shadow, your own anima or animus, your own unintegrated complexes being activated by someone who carries the hook for your projection. Let me explain it this way. Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face. When you say someone is arrogant, you may be confronting the confidence you learned to suppress in yourself. When someone's fakeness irritates you, you might be reacting to the times you had to pretend to survive. When you are drawn to someone mysterious, they may be carrying the qualities of your own undeveloped inferior function. This is not just theory. I've seen it in every analysis I've ever conducted. A businessman came to me once, complaining endlessly about his colleague's ambition. "He's so aggressive, so desperate to advance," he said with disgust. So I asked him, "Are you certain you despise his ambition, or are you angry at the ambition you suppress in yourself?" The room fell silent. Eventually, he said, "My father taught me that wanting too much was selfish." In that moment, he realized he wasn't reading his colleague at all. He was reading his own rejected desire for success, his own shadow of ambition that he had banished to the unconscious because his father's voice had made it seem wrong. This is how the shadow operates. Whatever we cannot accept in ourselves, we push into the unconscious, but it doesn't disappear. It projects outward, wearing other people's faces. The world becomes a mirror, reflecting our unintegrated content back to us, offering endless opportunities for recognition, if only we have the courage to see it. I often use the image of the moon and ocean to describe this. The moon never touches the water, yet it moves the tides. Other people are the same. They don't cause your emotions. They simply pull to the surface what already exists in your unconscious depths. The stronger your reaction, the more charged the complex they've activated within you. When you understand this, every encounter becomes an opportunity for self-knowledge. The person who angers you is showing you where you are not yet free. The person you admire is showing you the potential you haven't yet claimed. The person you fear is showing you the shadow you haven't yet integrated. The fourth question, what does this reveal about me? And so we arrive at the fourth and final question, the one that transforms observation into individuation. What does what I see in them reveal about me? This is where the journey turns inward. This is where psychological work becomes spiritual work. Because everything you thought was about them, their coldness, their charm, their cruelty, their kindness, is actually a message from your own unconscious demanding to be heard. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Every strong emotion you feel toward another person is an invitation to examine your own psyche. When someone makes you jealous, instead of focusing on what they have, ask yourself, what part of me feels lacking? What unlived life am I projecting onto them? When someone makes you uncomfortable, instead of judging them, ask, what aspect of myself am I seeing in them that I've rejected? I've watched this transformation happen countless times. A woman came to me once, filled with rage at fake people. They made her irrationally angry. Through our work together, she eventually realized that what she hated wasn't them. It was the memory of herself at 20, when she had to pretend to be confident and happy just to be accepted. She wasn't angry at others. She was angry at the part of herself that had been forced to wear a mask to survive. When she could look at that younger self with compassion instead of contempt, something miraculous happened. The irritation disappeared. She stopped seeing fake people everywhere. Instead, she saw human beings trying their best to navigate a world that often demands we hide our truth. She had integrated her shadow, and with it, gained the capacity for genuine compassion. This is what I call the integration of opposites, the fundamental process of individuation. You cannot become whole by rejecting parts of yourself. You become whole by bringing consciousness to everything you are, light and dark, strong and weak, noble and base. When you can hold these opposites without judgment, when you can say, this too is me, you access what I call the transcendent function. You move beyond the duality of ego consciousness into the wholeness of the self. But to reach this place, you must be willing to see yourself as you truly are. You must be willing to recognize that the outer world is not your enemy, it's your teacher. Every person you meet, every reaction you have, every judgment you make, is showing you the landscape of your own psyche. The question is not what's wrong with them. The question is always, what is this showing me about myself? The integration of understanding. Let me bring this full circle. When I first began my work in psychology, I believed I was studying other people. It took me years to realize I was studying myself. Every patient who walked through my door was carrying a piece of my own unconscious. Every dream I analyzed was analyzing me. Every projection I identified in others was teaching me about my own shadow. This is the great paradox of psychological work. You cannot truly understand anyone until you understand yourself. And you cannot understand yourself until you've learned to see yourself in everyone. The three questions I've given you: what do they fear losing? What makes them angry? How do they treat those who cannot benefit them? Are not techniques for manipulating others. They are practices for expanding consciousness. Each question you ask about someone else inevitably turns inward, becoming a question about your own unconscious structure. And the fourth question, what does this reveal about me, is the key that unlocks the entire process. It transforms you from an observer of others into a student of your own psyche. It takes you from the surface of consciousness to the depths of the unconscious, where real transformation occurs. I've spent my lifetime mapping the territory of the human psyche. I've identified archetypes, explored the collective unconscious, analyzed thousands of dreams, and worked with countless individuals on their journey toward wholeness. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty: the journey of understanding others is always, ultimately, a journey of understanding yourself. When you learn to read the unconscious, both in others and in yourself, you gain access to a deeper dimension of human experience. You stop being a victim of your reactions and become a conscious participant in your own psychological development. You stop projecting your unintegrated content onto the world and start taking responsibility for your own wholeness. This is what I call the individuation process, the journey of becoming who you truly are, of integrating all the scattered fragments of your psyche into a unified whole. It's not easy. It requires you to face your shadow, to integrate your inferior function, to confront your complexes, to make the unconscious conscious. But it's the most important work you can do, because until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So the next time you find yourself trying to read someone, trying to figure out what they really mean or what they are truly feeling, stop for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, what is my reaction to this person revealing about me? What part of my own unconscious is being activated? What is trying to become conscious through this encounter? Because in the end, the person in front of you is not your opponent or your puzzle to solve. They are your mirror, reflecting back to you the contents of your own psyche.